Welcome to my channel, Advanced Learners Studio.
Today's topic, the power of language and culture. We're embarking on a deep dive today into something incredibly profound and deeply woven into the fabric of human experience. The relationship between language and culture. This isn't just about, vocabulary lists of grammar rules. It's about exploring how the words we use, the way we structure sentences, the sounds we make, how all of that reflects our history, shapes our understanding of the world, and, acts as a driving force behind how cultures live, breathe, and evolve. We have some truly insightful material provided by you, our listener, to explore, and our mission is really to get you quickly and thoroughly informed on this complex and fascinating subject.
And what's truly striking when you examine the material is the depth of that connection. Language isn't merely a tool for communication. It's presented more as a dynamic repository of collective knowledge, almost like a mirror reflecting society's values and structures. And it's an active participant, in shaping our cultural landscape. Our aim today is to unpack the key ideas, provide some essential context, and really highlight the most significant takeaways so you can fully appreciate the vast influence language has on, pretty much every aspect of cultural life.
Okay, let's really unpack this then.
Yeah.
Starting with the foundational concept presented in the material. Thinking of language as the heartbeat of culture. It frames language not just as an accessory to culture, but is absolutely central to it. It's portrayed as this intricate system that doesn't just allow us to communicate about human experience, but actively shapes that experience. It binds communities together and plays a crucial role in defining collective identities. The argument seems to be that language is fundamental to how we perceive the world, how we pass down our heritage, and also how we adapt and transform that heritage over time.
That's right. The source material goes beyond simply stating that language is important. It really emphasizes its role as an essential archive. Think of it holding centuries of history embedded within its very structure and vocabulary.
Wow.
And it acts as a direct mirror to societal values and norms. But importantly, it's not just passive, it's dynamic. It's presented as an active catalyst that drives cultural evolution. Language constantly constructs, sustains, and reshapes culture in response to changing environments, new technologies, social interactions.
That perspective leads us right into the first major theme this deep dive explores. Language as the absolute foundation of cultural identity. The material powerfully argues that language isn't just a communication tool, it's, a cornerstone that encapsulates the very essence of a group's history, their values, their entire worldview.
Exactly.
It highlights a point that might seem obvious, but is profoundly important. For many communities, especially those whose languages have faced historical pressure, simply speaking, their native language is a potent act of cultural affirmation, a declaration of who they are and where they come from.
Absolutely. And when we look at indigenous languages like, say, Navajo in the United States or Māori in New Zealand, the material underscores that they are far more than just communication systems in the conventional sense. They are described as vessels of unique epistemologies.
Epistemologies.
Yeah.
Ways of knowing.
Precisely. It's a critical concept. It means these languages carry distinct ways of knowing, distinct conceptual frameworks for understanding reality, which are deeply specific to that particular culture's history, environment, spiritual beliefs, you name it. And trying to translate them literally into a language like English, which comes from a completely different cultural and conceptual lineage, often means losing these embedded ways of knowing. The essence gets lost.
Could you give us a more detailed picture of what that looks like with the examples from the material? How does a language like Navajo actually embed a worldview?
Certainly. The Navajo language, or Diné Bizad, is a rich example. The structure of the language itself, its verbs and nouns, it embeds complex concepts around kinship, how people are related, their reciprocal obligations, and also this profound idea of harmony with nature.
It's built right into the grammar.
In many ways, yes. These aren't abstract philosophical concepts in Navajo. They're woven into everyday speech. For instance, certain grammatical structures might emphasize the relationship between the speaker and the natural world they're describing in a way English just doesn't. The material highlights that finding direct equivalents for these ideas in English is, really difficult because English doesn't carry the same inherent emphasis on these specific relationships.
Okay.
You might be able to describe the concept in English, sure, but the linguistic structure itself doesn't reinforce it in the same immediate way. And that speaks volumes about the cultural priorities embedded in the language.
That's fascinating. So it's not just a word-for-word difference, but the actual structure of the language shapes how you think about concepts like family or nature. What about the Māori example? How does that work?
With Maori, or Te Reo Maori, the material uses the term whanau as a key illustration.
Right, I've heard that word.
Yeah. And while a dictionary might simply translate whanau as family, its cultural weight in Maori is far heavier, far deeper than the English word typically conveys. Whanau refers to an extended family that includes not just parents and children, but grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, and often adopted relatives, close friends. It's a much broader, interconnected unit.
Much bigger than the nuclear family idea.
Exactly. The term emphasizes communal bonds, shared responsibilities, collective identity in a way that the English term family often doesn't capture. Using whanau evokes a whole cultural context of mutual support, collective well-being, something absolutely central to Maori identity.
It sounds like these words are just dense with cultural meaning that goes far beyond a simple translation, which makes the issue of language loss incredibly poignant, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. And the material raises this as a critical challenge to global cultural diversity. The source mentions UNESCO's Atlas of the World's Languages in Danger, and its estimate is quite alarming.
What does it say?
Out of the roughly 7,000 languages spoken globally today, over 3,000, more than 40%, are predicted to potentially disappear by the end of this century, by 2100.
Wow, that's staggering.
It is. And this is more than just a linguistic statistic. The crucial point the material makes is that when a language falls silent, it's not just a dictionary or grammar that's lost. Entire systems of knowledge unique to that culture vanish with it. Knowledge about local ecology, traditional medicine, unique storytelling traditions, songs, spiritual practices, ways of understanding history and the world that are encoded within that specific language.
That's a really sobering thought. It means losing not just a language, but potentially a whole way of being knowing. But the material also highlights areas of hope, right? Revitalization efforts are underway.
Yes, thankfully. The source points to vibrant language revitalization efforts as powerful examples of cultural survival in action. Initiatives like the immersion schools for Hawaiian, such as those run by the Kanahunamoku Hawaiian Language Immersion Program, or the community-based efforts to promote Welsh throughout Wales, are presented as being synonymous with cultural preservation.
So they're not just language classes.
Not at all. These are not merely academic projects. They're described as profound cultural movements. Communities are actively working to reclaim their linguistic heritage, often in the face of historical marginalization that actively sought to suppress their languages and cultures.
So revitalizing the language is literally revitalizing the culture itself. That makes sense. The material then shifts perspective a bit, looking at how language shapes personal identity, particularly for people who are multilingual.
Yes, and what's very insightful here is the exploration of code switching.
Code switching.
Yeah.
Changing languages depending on the situation.
Exactly. It's the phenomenon where multilingual individuals fluidly switch between languages or dialects depending on the social context, who they're speaking to, or even the topic of conversation. The material uses a common example. A Mexican-American person might speak Spanish at home with family, but switch to English at work or school.
Right.
And this linguistic flexibility isn't just about practical communication. It's deeply tied to identity. Speaking Spanish in a family context might feel more authentic to their Latinx heritage and personal history, while using English connects them to broader societal norms and opportunities, perhaps. This kind of linguistic negotiation can often lead to what the source terms a hybrid identity, where individuals blend elements from different cultural and linguistic backgrounds in novel and personal ways.
Interesting. It sounds like a way of expressing different facets of your identity depending on the situation. This must connect strongly with the experience of diaspora communities too, people living away from their ancestral homes.
Absolutely. For individuals and communities living outside their ancestral homelands, language is often the most tangible and vital link to their cultural roots. The source gives the example of second-generation immigrants in places like Canada, maybe Punjabi Canadians. They often make deliberate efforts to maintain their heritage language, Punjabi, even as they become fluent and integrated into Canadian society using English or French.
How do they do that?
Well, through things like attending language classes, participating in cultural festivals, consuming community media newspapers, radio, websites in Punjabi, or say, Cantonese for other groups. These practices actively reinforce a sense of dual identity. They allow people to honor their heritage, stay connected to their culture, while also fully participating in their current society.
And this drive to preserve language both individually and communally seems fundamentally linked to the idea of cultural sovereignty, asserting their right to exist culturally.
It is, very much so. The material emphasizes that community-led initiatives to preserve and revitalize endangered languages are powerful assertions of cultural sovereignty. It references efforts by Aboriginal Australian communities for languages like Warlpiri. These initiatives involve grassroots projects, things like community radio broadcasts in Warlpiri, developing school curricula taught in the language.
So taking control of their own cultural narrative.
Precisely. The source explicitly frames these efforts as directly countering the historical suppression experienced during colonial times, when dominant powers often enforced assimilation policies. Policies that aim to erase indigenous languages and cultures through things like compulsory English-only education.
So it's a form of cultural resistance and self-determination. The example of Irish Gaelic revitalization, similar to that, right? Pushing back against historical suppression.
Exactly. The revitalization of Irish Gaelic, or Gaelage, is another powerful case study presented. Supported by government policies in both the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland, and prominently featured in media outlets like the Irish language television channel TG4, this effort shows how a language can be actively brought back from decline, and how it can be used to reassert cultural autonomy and national identity. It really illustrates how language policy and community action can work together to reclaim a heritage that was marginalized for centuries.
And technology, you mentioned earlier, is increasingly playing a role in these preservation efforts too.
It definitely is. The source points to digital innovation as a significant tool in language preservation today. You have initiatives like the Rosetta Project creating vast digital archives of thousands of languages, and language learning apps like Duolingo, for example, are now developing courses for endangered languages, making languages like Navajo or Scottish Gaelic accessible to learners globally. This is particularly important for reaching younger generations who are comfortable with digital tools.
Yeah, makes sense.
Furthermore, social media platforms like X are being used by linguistic communities to connect globally. They share resources, narratives, cultural content in their native tongues, fostering a sense of global awareness and cultural pride that can transcend geographical boundaries.
Now, here's where it gets really interesting, I think. Language isn't just about defining who we are as individuals or groups. It's also fundamentally about how we relate to each other within and across communities. The material delves into how shared language fosters social cohesion, but also, maybe counterintuitively, how it can create divisions.
That's right. If we connect this to the bigger picture, having a shared language is presented as foundational to creating shared spaces for communication and mutual understanding. Within any community, a common language facilitates interaction, helps establish those unspoken social norms, and reinforces trust among its members. It provides the essential framework, really, through which daily life, shared rituals, and social interactions take on common meaning and predictability.
Can you give us some more detailed examples from the material about how shared language builds community and reinforces cultural values and practice?
Certainly. In Japan, the intricate system of honorifics known as keigo is a prime illustration.
Ah, yes, the politeness levels.
Exactly. But keigo isn't just polite language. It's a complex system of verb conjugations, vocabulary suffixes used to show respect based on social hierarchy, seniority, relationships. Using the appropriate keigo strengthens social bonds, maintains harmony in interactions, and reflects deep-seated cultural values of respect, humility, and group orientation within Japanese society. Misusing it can actually disrupt social harmony.
So the language itself enforces the social structure.
In a very direct way. Another powerful example comes from African languages, like Yoruba. Proverbs are incredibly significant culturally. A proverb like, and I'll paraphrase the meaning, one hand cannot lift someone up just as one leg cannot walk, essentially means it takes a village to raise a child. This saying, used frequently in conversation, doesn't just state a fact, it encapsulates and reinforces a core communal value of collective responsibility and mutual support. It guides behavior and strengthens unity within the community.
Those are great examples of how language isn't just functional. It can be prescriptive, guiding behavior, and reinforcing cultural structures. The Spanish tradition of sobremesa is also highlighted, isn't it?
Yes, sobremesa. It refers to the cultural practice in many Spanish-speaking countries of lingering at the table to talk and socialize long after a meal has finished.
Just chatting after dinner.
Well, yes, but it's more ingrained. It's not merely an extended post-dinner chat. It's a cultural ritual centered around conversation and connection. Language is absolutely essential here. It's used to reinforce familial bonds and social ties through relaxed, extended discussion. It really underscores how deeply cultural habits and relationship building are often built around shared linguistic practices and the value placed on communal dialogue.
So language acts as a powerful unifier, creating these shared spaces and strengthening bonds. But the material also acknowledges the flip side. Language can act as a divider.
It certainly can. Within larger linguistic communities, variations like dialects and accents often carry significant social weight. They can signal regional origin, social class, or ethnic background. And unfortunately, these linguistic markers can sometimes lead to unconscious bias, exclusion, or the reinforcement of social stratifications.
Like judging someone by their accent.
Essentially, yes. In the United Kingdom, the material notes how distinct regional accents, like Cockney, historically associated with working-class Londoners, or received pronunciation, often linked to upper-class and educated speakers, can carry strong social connotations. These linguistic differences can sometimes reinforce existing class divides within society.
That's something many people experience firsthand, I imagine. And India is presented as a particularly complex example of how linguistic diversity, while incredibly rich, can also lead to tension.
India is a fascinating case study. You have this incredible linguistic richness, over 1,600 languages and dialects recorded, just staggering.
Wow.
This diversity is a source of immense cultural pride, naturally. But the material highlights that it has also historically been a source of political and social tension. The debate over prioritizing Hindi as the sole national language, for instance, sparked significant resistance in non-Hindi-speaking regions.
I remember hearing about that.
In places like Tamil Nadu in the south, where Tamil is the dominant language and a symbol of ancient cultural pride, there were strong movements asserting the importance and status of Tamil against what was perceived as Hindi linguistic dominance or imposition. It demonstrates how language can become a potent focal point for regional or ethnic identity, sometimes leading to conflict against perceived linguistic or cultural hegemony.
And the material points out that language also mediates power dynamics, particularly relating back to colonial histories.
This is a crucial point about the legacy of colonialism. Imposed colonial languages often became the languages of power, government, education, commerce. This inherently marginalized local indigenous cultures and languages. In Nigeria, for example, English remains the official language and the primary language of formal institutions.
All right.
This means that indigenous languages like Igbo, Hausa, or Yoruba, while spoken by millions, can be sidelined in official or professional settings. This can perpetuate certain power structures inherited from the colonial era and impact access to opportunities for those less fluent in English.
That's a stark example of language as a tool of power, maintaining inequalities. But the source also offers a contrasting example where language bridges divides.
Yes, it does, thankfully. The rise of Swahili across East Africa provides a powerful counterpoint. Swahili developed historically as a lingua franca, a common language primarily for trade and communication among diverse ethnic and linguistic groups along the East African coast. Today, it serves as a unifying language in several countries like Tanzania and Kenya. It facilitates communication, fosters a sense of shared East African identity, and bridges linguistic boundaries that could otherwise be barriers to cooperation and understanding among diverse populations. It shows how language can evolve to become a tool for connection and shared identity.
It's remarkable how language can play such opposite roles, dividing and uniting. The material also discusses language's crucial role in social movements and driving cultural change.
Yes, language is undeniably a fundamental tool for mobilizing people, shaping collective action, and ultimately driving cultural change. During the U.S. Civil Rights Movement, the power of language was on full display. The rhetoric used in speeches, most famously Martin Luther King Jr.'s "I Have a Dream" speech.
An iconic example.
Absolutely. It was masterfully crafted. He used powerful metaphors, repetition, appeals rooted in shared cultural values, religious language, all to inspire millions, articulate a vision of equality, and challenge the deeply ingrained cultural norms of segregation and racial injustice.
And in South Africa, during the anti-apartheid struggle, how did language function there?
That's another strong example the material uses. The anti-apartheid movement was incredibly linguistically diverse, reflecting the multicultural nature of the resistance itself. Protest songs and slogans often incorporated multiple languages: Zulu, Xhosa, Sotho, Afrikaans, English. This wasn't accidental.
It was deliberate.
It seems so. This linguistic diversity in their expressions of resistance was often a conscious reflection of solidarity across linguistic lines. It united different groups against a common oppressor and created a shared cultural expression of defiance.
And looking at more contemporary movements, social media is now a key battleground, or maybe platform, for language and social change.
Absolutely. Modern movements like hashtag Black Lives Matter heavily leverage language on platforms like X. Hashtags become rallying cries, slogans spread globally almost instantly, and messages are often crafted and shared in multiple languages. This allows for the creation of global solidarity, amplifying cultural messages beyond national borders and uniting diverse groups around shared causes. It's a powerful demonstration of how language can be used not just to communicate dissent, but to actively challenge dominant cultural narratives and mobilize collective action on a massive scale.
Moving into another crucial area, the material explores how language acts as a vehicle for cultural transmission. It's described as the primary medium through which culture is passed down from one generation to the next.
This is where the role of oral traditions becomes incredibly vital, especially in historical contexts or cultures without long traditions of writing. In many cultures, particularly those with limited or no historical reliance on written scripts, oral traditions are the main way knowledge, history, and values are preserved and shared. The source highlights the example of griots in West Africa.
The storytellers.
Yes, but much more than just storytellers. They are esteemed historians, musicians, oral poets in societies like those of the Mandinka people. They use complex oral techniques in languages like Mandinka to preserve genealogies, recount historical events, perform epic poems, tell folk tales, and pass down moral lessons and social norms. Their function is absolutely crucial in maintaining cultural memory and identity, especially where written records might be scarce.
And these oral traditions aren't just rigid retellings, are they? I think the material notes they can adapt over time.
That's a key point, yes. Oral traditions are living things, not static records set in stone. The material mentions Aboriginal Australian Dreamtime stories, passed down in languages like Arrente in Central Australia. While preserving ancient narratives about creation, the land, spiritual beliefs, these stories can also evolve over time. They might incorporate new experiences or modern themes, showing the adaptability of cultural transmission through language. These stories are incredibly rich cultural archives, encoding vital knowledge about the environment, complex spiritual beliefs, social structures, norms, all within their linguistic and narrative forms.
So language holds this deep reservoir of cultural memory through oral means. But written language is also fundamental in codifying and transmitting culture across time and space.
Absolutely. Written language plays a critical, complementary role in preserving and transmitting culture through literature, religious texts, legal codes, historical documents, and so on. Texts like Homer's Iliad from ancient Greece or the Ramayana from ancient India, written in Sanskrit, are presented not just as great literary works, but as foundational cultural touchstones. They've shaped ethical frameworks, societal values, artistic expression for centuries in their respective cultures.
And religious texts are often central to this, acting as cultural anchors.
Yes, religious texts are often the most significant cultural artifacts in many societies, beyond just their spiritual function. The Quran in Arabic or the Torah in Hebrew, for instance, have profoundly influenced not only religious practice, but also art, architecture, law, social norms within their respective cultural spheres for millennia. Written language also enables modern forms of cultural transmission and preservation. The transcription of previously oral histories in indigenous languages, say Quechua in Peru, is now happening to ensure these vital cultural narratives are preserved and accessible to future generations in written form. And digital archives like the Endangered Languages Project Online are cataloging languages and their cultural contexts, using written text, audio, video, other media to ensure their survival in the digital age.
And the digital age itself has really changed the landscape of cultural transmission via language, hasn't it?
It's transformed it significantly. Digital media and online platforms have become powerful tools for cultural transmission, sometimes bypassing traditional gatekeepers or methods. Social media, like X, allows communities to share their stories, songs, traditions, contemporary cultural expressions globally and instantaneously.
You mentioned examples earlier.
Yes, the source gives examples like Cherokee language teachers using online videos to teach the Cherokee syllabary to dispersed communities, or Inuit communities sharing oral histories and traditional knowledge in Inuktitut on podcasts. These digital tools democratize cultural transmission, making it accessible across vast geographical distances and time zones in ways that weren't possible before.
But there are challenges, as you mentioned earlier, with social media, particularly with the dominance of certain languages like English online.
Precisely. The sheer volume of content in English online can inadvertently marginalize smaller languages and contribute to a form of digital cultural homogenization where diverse voices get drowned out. However, there are active efforts to counter this. Promoting the creation of multilingual content is key, and platforms like Wikipedia actively support articles written in a vast range of languages, including those with fewer speakers, like Shona or Guarani. The explicit aim is to preserve and share cultural knowledge in digital forms across diverse linguistic communities.
Okay, stepping into the realm of creativity now. The material describes language as the fundamental backbone of artistic expression, which seems intuitive, but how does it elaborate?
Indeed. This is perhaps most obvious in literature and poetry. The source notes that poetry in particular has a unique power to distill the essence of a culture through what it calls linguistic precision. That means the careful choice and arrangement of words to evoke deep cultural meaning and feeling.
Are there specific forms highlighted as examples?
Yes. The Japanese haiku, with its strict 5-7 to 5-syllable structure, is mentioned. This form isn't arbitrary. Its conciseness and focus often reflect aesthetic and philosophical principles rooted in Zen Buddhism, capturing fleeting moments of nature or insight in a very culturally specific way. The Persian ghazal is another example, a lyrical poetic form characterized by rhyming couplets and a recurring refrain. It's a form often used to explore themes of love, spirituality, loss, embodying specific cultural aesthetics and emotional landscapes within its intricate linguistic structure.
And broader literature.
Literature more broadly serves as a powerful mirror and sometimes shaper of cultural identity. Chinua Achebe's seminal novel, Things Fall Apart, is highlighted.
A classic.
It is. Written in English, but deliberately weaving in Igbo proverbs, idioms, narrative structures. Achebe uses language not just to tell a story, but to implicitly highlight the tension between colonial narratives and indigenous realities. It shows how language can be used to both preserve and subtly critique cultural norms within a single work.
So language provides both the structure and the deep cultural resonance for these artistic forms. What about music and performance arts?
Language is equally vital in music for conveying cultural narratives, emotion, identity. Think of Bob Dylan's folk songs, sung in English, deeply embedded in American cultural discourse, giving voice to the counterculture movements of the 1960s. Similarly, Fela Kuti's Afrobeat music, often sung in a mix of Yoruba and English, was a powerful political tool used to protest oppression and highlight social issues in Nigeria, carrying specific cultural messages within its rhythms and lyrics.
Interesting.
The source even notes that some instrumental music draws inspiration from linguistic patterns. It cites West African drumming traditions that are said to mimic the tonal patterns of spoken languages like Ewe, demonstrating a deep, almost subconscious connection between linguistic and musical structures in some cultures.
Wow. And theater and film.
Theater and film also use language to explore societal issues through specific cultural lenses. Playwrights like Bertolt Brecht using German to explore political themes through his specific techniques, or August Wilson capturing the unique dialects and experiences of African Americans in his cycle of plays. They use language to build worlds that reflect particular cultural contexts and societal concerns.
And I imagine translating theater or film across cultures, trying to preserve that specific linguistic nuance, must be incredibly complex.
It is a significant challenge, yes. While subtitles and dubbing make global cinema and theater accessible worldwide, the material points out that translating cultural nuances, things like subtle humor, sarcasm, slang, specific idioms, is incredibly difficult. The specific way something is said in the original language is often tied intimately to a cultural context that just doesn't have a direct equivalent elsewhere. It highlights how much can be lost in conveying the full cultural meaning through translation.
Is there any connection made to visual arts? Does language influence that too?
Briefly, yes. The material mentions how language influences visual arts, particularly where text and imagery intersect. Calligraphy in cultures like Arabic and Chinese is a prime example.
Right, where writing is art.
Exactly. The written word itself is elevated to a high art form, embodying cultural aesthetics, discipline, spiritual significance. Graffiti art is another example mentioned, often incorporating slogans, tags, phrases that reflect urban culture, social commentary, or political protest. Street art in Brazil's favelas, for instance, might incorporate Portuguese phrases highlighting social inequality or community resilience, showing how language and visual form can capture and transmit aspects of urban culture and social consciousness.
Let's shift focus now to the realm of the sacred. The material highlights language's absolute centrality to religious expression and practice.
Yes, religion is another domain where language plays a fundamental, often sacred role. Religious texts, the Bible for Christianity, the Quran for Islam, the Vedas for Hinduism, are presented not just as sources of spiritual guidance, but as foundational cultural cornerstones. They shape not only religious beliefs and practices, but also influence morality, law, art, architecture, social norms within their respective cultural spheres, often for millennia.
And specific languages are often deemed sacred or essential for rituals, aren't they?
Absolutely. The use of Arabic in Islamic prayers, regardless of a worshiper's native language, is a powerful example. It creates a linguistic link among Muslims globally, reinforcing a shared religious and cultural identity rooted in the language of the holy text. Similarly, the traditional use of Sanskrit in many Hindu rituals connects practitioners to ancient traditions and a shared linguistic heritage that spans thousands of years. Religious language actively shapes cultural practices too. Well, the historical use of Latin in the Catholic liturgy across Europe, for instance, created a linguistic unity among adherents for centuries, while the shift towards using vernacular languages after the Second Vatican Council reflected broader cultural movements towards accessibility and the integration of local languages and customs into worship.
So adapting to the culture.
Right. And similarly, the translation of core Buddhist texts into various local languages like Tibetan, Thai, or Japanese over centuries shows how spiritual practices adapt to specific cultural contexts through language, making the teachings accessible and relevant to local populations.
So language acts both as a unifier and an adapter within religious practice, and it clearly reinforces religious identity for groups.
It does, often creating a distinct shared sense of community among believers. The modern revival of Hebrew in Israel is a key example. It's strongly tied not only to national identity, but also to Jewish cultural and religious identity, transforming a language primarily used for liturgy and scholarship into a living, modern spoken language.
That's quite a transformation.
It is. In contrast, the historical shift to using vernacular languages in many Protestant churches emphasized accessibility and reflected cultural values of inclusivity, making religious services and texts understandable to the common person in their everyday language. The material also acknowledges, though, that religious language can sometimes become a marker of division or conflict.
Yes, how does that manifest?
In diverse societies like India, for example, the distinct use of Sanskrit in many Hindi rituals versus the prominent use of Urdu in many Islamic contexts can sometimes symbolize religious divides. This can influence cultural perceptions and potentially create social or political boundaries between communities. However, the source also notes the potential for connection. Interfaith dialogues often rely on finding shared linguistic ground or utilizing careful translation to bridge cultural and religious gaps. This highlights language's potential to foster understanding even across significant differences.
Okay, transitioning to a different kind of power now. The material describes language as a powerful political instrument.
Yes, language is fundamentally intertwined with politics. It's used deliberately to shape narratives, influence public opinion, and assert or negotiate power dynamics. Political rhetoric, whether in speeches, propaganda, policy debates, relies heavily on language to mobilize cultural identities, appeal to shared values, and persuade or sometimes divide populations.
Like the Nelson Mandela example you mentioned earlier.
Exactly. Nelson Mandela was renowned for his ability to use language to unite a deeply divided nation. He often incorporated elements of Xhosa, his native language, alongside English in his speeches, strategically reaching out to and unifying diverse South African communities behind the common cause of dismantling apartheid and building a new nation. Nationalist movements also frequently leverage language as a powerful symbol to assert cultural autonomy and political distinctiveness. The use of the Catalan language in Catalonia, Spain is a prime example cited. Promoting and using Catalan is central to asserting Catalan cultural identity and the movement for greater political autonomy from Spanish-speaking Spain.
And language policies themselves, decisions made by governments about language use, are often deeply political, reflecting national priorities and underlying power structures.
They certainly are. Language policies enacted by governments often reveal underlying political priorities regarding national identity, cultural inclusion, or sometimes assimilation. In Canada, the official policy of bilingualism, recognizing both English and French, is a political choice aimed at promoting cultural pluralism and accommodating the country's two major linguistic groups. In contrast, the material points to instances where language policies have caused tension. It mentions Turkey's historical prioritization of the Turkish language, which has sometimes led to the marginalization of minority languages like Kurdish, becoming a source of significant cultural and political friction. This illustrates how language policies can be instruments of national unity or, conversely, sources of division, depending on how they are implemented and perceived by different linguistic groups within a state.
So language can fuel nationalism, for better or worse.
Very often, yes. Language has been a potent force in nationalist movements around the world. The role of Hindi in India's independence movement, serving as a potential unifying language for a diverse nation seeking to break free from colonial rule, or the Gaelic language revival being intrinsically tied to the Irish independence movement and cultural nationalism. These are powerful historical examples. However, while promoting unity within a dominant group, prioritizing one language for national identity can sometimes lead to the exclusion or marginalization of linguistic minorities. This is part of the ongoing debate in places like the United States regarding English-only policies. Proponents argue for linguistic unity, while critics highlight the potential for excluding non-English speakers and devaluing other languages.
Are there examples given of language policies that actively try to promote inclusivity among multiple language groups?
Yes, Switzerland provides a prominent example of managing linguistic diversity politically. With 4 official languages, German, French, Italian, and Romansh, Switzerland has developed policies and a federal structure that aim to accommodate and promote each linguistic group. This approach seeks to balance the need for national unity with the celebration and preservation of significant cultural and linguistic diversity within the country. It demonstrates a model where multiple languages are integrated into the political and national fabric quite successfully, although it's not without its complexities.
Okay, moving into another foundational area. Education. The material discusses education as a key arena for language's cultural impact.
Yes, education systems play a critical role in both language transmission and cultural preservation, or sometimes suppression. Bilingual education programs, like those established for Māori in New Zealand or Welsh in Wales, are often designed with the explicit aim of not only teaching a language, but also preserving cultural heritage alongside it.
So it's language and culture education.
Exactly. These programs seek to immerse students in their native language and culture, fostering both linguistic fluency and cultural pride. They are often seen as a direct response to, and a way to counter, the historical marginalization faced by these languages in past education systems that prioritize dominant languages, like the notorious English-only colonial schools in many parts of the world.
And the resurgence of indigenous language programs in places like the U.S. fits directly into this model.
Precisely. The growth of indigenous language immersion schools, like the Navajo immersion schools mentioned, are contemporary examples of this approach. These schools often teach the standard curriculum entirely through the native language, deeply embedding cultural values, histories, and ways of knowing within the educational framework itself. This actively counters the legacy of assimilation-focused education and empowers younger generations to connect with their heritage in a meaningful way.
Beyond preservation, language education is also increasingly seen as vital for global competence in today's interconnected world.
Absolutely. In our increasingly globalized society, the ability to communicate effectively in multiple languages is a significant asset, both professionally and personally. Learning languages beyond one's native tongue equips individuals with the linguistic and cultural tools needed to navigate diverse cultural contexts, fosters empathy, and promotes cross-cultural understanding. Programs like the Erasmus Plus initiative in Europe, which facilitates student exchanges and strongly encourages learning new languages, reflect a cultural value placed on interconnectedness, mobility, and multilingualism as essential for both individual development and broader European integration and understanding.
Okay, let's delve a bit further into technology's influence on language and culture, building on some of our earlier points about preservation and social media.
Right. Technology continues to offer powerful tools for language preservation and access, which is crucial given the threats many languages face. Digital archives, like the comprehensive Rosetta project we touched on, are working tirelessly to document and store linguistic data from thousands of languages, creating invaluable resources for future generations, linguists, and the communities themselves. And apps, like Memrise and others, are not only teaching widely spoken languages, but increasingly adding courses for smaller or endangered languages like Shona or Sami. These tools make the cultural heritage contained within languages much more accessible, which is particularly important for diaspora communities who might be physically separated from their ancestral linguistic roots.
Machine translation is obviously a huge part of technology and language today. How does the material discuss its impact on cultural nuance specifically?
Machine translation tools, Google Translate being the most well-known perhaps, are incredibly useful for basic cross-cultural communication, and the material certainly acknowledges their role in facilitating interaction. But it also highlights their significant limitations, particularly when dealing with subtle cultural nuances. These tools often struggle with translating idiomatic expressions, slang, humor, or the complexities of tonal languages like Yoruba, where tone changes meaning. A literal word-for-word translation can completely distort the intended meaning or miss the cultural context entirely. Sometimes this leads to amusing errors, but other times it can cause significant misunderstandings.
Yeah, I see that.
It really underscores the ongoing need for culturally sensitive technology development and, perhaps more importantly, the irreplaceable value of skilled human translators who understand both the language and the intricate cultural context behind the words.
And social media platforms continue to shape cultural exchange via language, for better or worse.
They do. Platforms like X are central to contemporary cultural exchange and the formation of global cultural conversations. We talked about hashtags.
Right, like hashtag #MeToo variations.
Exactly. Hashtags, when adopted and translated or adapted into multiple languages like hashtag yo también in Spanish or hashtag overstuent in Arabic for the hashtag #MeToo movement, create global resonance for shared experiences. They transcend linguistic barriers while also allowing for culturally specific expressions and discussions within those movements. However, the challenge remains. The digital space is still heavily dominated by English content. This can potentially marginalize voices and content in smaller languages, reinforcing the need for continued efforts to actively promote and create content in a wider range of languages to ensure a more equitable representation of global cultures online.
It seems clear from everything we've discussed that language isn't static at all. It's presented as a living entity that constantly adapts to cultural change.
It absolutely is. Language is permeable and dynamic, constantly evolving alongside the cultures that speak it. It has to be to remain relevant. One clear manifestation of this is through loanwords, words adopted from one language into another, reflecting cultural exchange and contact over time.
Like sushi or pizza.
Exactly. English, for example, has adopted countless words from other cultures over centuries. Terms like sushi from Japanese, yoga from Sanskrit, fiesta from Spanish, kindergarten from German, chic from French. The list is endless. And conversely, other languages adopt English words like French using le weekend or le marketing. These linguistic exchanges enrich languages, adding new concepts and expressions, while often still preserving the cultural distinctiveness associated with the original term or concept.
And diaspora communities often create entirely new linguistic forms that really show this adaptation in action.
Yes, they frequently develop hybrid languages or codes that creatively blend elements from the different tongues spoken in their environment. Examples mentioned include Spanglish, a blend of Spanish and English common in many Latinx communities in the United States, or Hinglish, a mix of Hindi and English heard frequently in India and parts of the Indian diaspora.
And these aren't just random mixes.
Not at all. Spanglish, for instance, is more than just mixing words. It often involves complex grammatical structures and cultural references drawn from both languages, reflecting a lived bicultural identity and experience for those who speak it. These hybrid forms are powerful demonstrations of language's incredible adaptability and creativity as it responds to new cultural realities, migration, and the lived experiences of people navigating multiple linguistic worlds simultaneously.
And globalization, the big force shaping our times, has a huge impact on this adaptation and change, both positive and negative.
Globalization is a massive force, and its impact on language is complex. On one hand, the rise of English as a dominant global lingua franca, particularly in areas like international business, science, technology, popular culture, undoubtedly facilitates communication on a massive scale.
It makes things easier in some ways.
It can. However, this dominance can also potentially overshadow or even threaten the vitality of local languages, especially those with fewer speakers or less economic power associated with them. On the other hand, globalization also fosters greater linguistic exchange and awareness. People are more exposed to other languages and cultures than ever before. And efforts to promote multilingualism, such as the extensive language policies within the European Union supporting its many official member state languages, attempt to strike a balance enabling global connectivity through shared languages while actively working to preserve the rich tapestry of local cultures and languages. It's a constant negotiation.
Taking a step back one last time, the material also looks at the broader power dynamics tied to language on a global scale, beyond just individual nations.
Yes, this is where the concept of linguistic imperialism becomes relevant, a term used to describe the dominance of certain languages, often linked to historical colonial power or current economic and cultural influence. The global spread and dominance of languages like English, French, or Spanish are seen as reflecting these broader cultural and political power dynamics.
How does that play out practically?
Well, the prevalence of English, for example, in global media, scientific research publication, and international business can inadvertently marginalize cultures that don't primarily operate in English. It can impact their influence and visibility on the global stage. The material points to the underrepresentation of many African languages, for instance, in global academic publishing, linking this partly back to colonial histories where European languages suppressed indigenous tongues and established their own as the languages of prestige and power, a legacy that persists.
And how does this play out in large international organizations like the UN?
Even within international institutions like the United Nations, which make efforts to manage linguistic diversity by having multiple official languages currently, the reality is that English and French often tend to dominate in daily operations and key discussions. This can subtly affect the cultural representation and influence of member states whose primary languages are not as widely used within the institution, potentially skewing perspectives or priorities. However, there are ongoing efforts within international bodies. The material mentions the African Union's move to include Swahili as an official working language, which aim to promote greater cultural equity and ensure that more linguistic and cultural perspectives are represented on the global stage.
So translation on a global scale, then, is also deeply connected to cultural representation and power dynamics.
It absolutely is. Translation is crucial for bridging linguistic divides, obviously, but it also fundamentally shapes how cultures are perceived globally. Translating literature, for example, like the works of Nobel laureate Gabriel Garcia Marquez from Spanish into dozens of other languages, introduces diverse cultural perspectives and narratives to a global audience, which is immensely valuable.
But as we said, nuance can be lost.
Exactly. There's always the risk of losing some cultural nuances or specific artistic effects in translation. Similarly, in diplomatic contexts, like translating speeches at the UN or during international negotiations, accuracy and cultural sensitivity are absolutely paramount. Any misrepresentation or cultural misunderstanding due to linguistic issues could have significant international consequences. It's high stakes.
So bringing all this together as we wrap up, the material outlines some key challenges and opportunities we face in a world with such incredible linguistic diversity.
It really highlights that linguistic diversity is undeniably one of humanity's greatest strengths. It enriches our collective knowledge, our perspectives, our creativity. However, it also presents inherent complexities for communication, for rational unity in diverse states, and for simple social interaction sometimes. Policies that actively promote multilingualism within a nation, like those in Singapore, which recognizes 4 official languages, English, Malay, Mandarin Chinese, Tamil, trying to balance diversity with communication efficiency and national identity. These are presented as attempts to navigate this complexity successfully. Conversely, language conflicts, such as those that have historically occurred in Belgium between Flemish, Dutch, and French speakers, underscore the challenges that can arise when linguistic differences align with political or social tensions.
And technology continues to present both opportunities and risks in this balancing act.
Exactly. Technology offers unprecedented opportunities for language documentation, preservation, and revitalization, as we've seen with projects like the Digital Language Diversity Project, which aims to ensure all languages have some presence online. But it also risks exacerbating existing inequalities if digital resources and infrastructure aren't accessible to all linguistic communities, potentially leaving some languages and cultures even further behind in the digital age. The digital divide is also a linguistic divide.
And education remains crucial for navigating these complexities successfully.
Absolutely. The material underscores the vital role of education systems in fostering not only linguistic fluency, but also cultural fluency in a globalized world. Countries like Finland, where students typically learn Finnish, Swedish, an official minority language, and English, are cited as examples of how education can prepare individuals to thrive in a multilingual environment, promoting both national cultural heritage and the skills needed for global interconnectedness.
Wow, we've covered a tremendous amount of ground in this deep dive, looking at how language is fundamental to identity, how it shapes social bonds, transmits culture across generations, forms the basis for artistic expression, is central to religious practice, acts as a powerful political instrument, is key in education, is impacted by technology, adapts over time, and plays out in global power dynamics. It's a lot.
It really reinforces the core idea that the power of language and culture is incredibly profound, multifaceted, and touches pretty much every aspect of human life. Language is presented consistently as this living entity, constantly evolving alongside culture, both reflecting societal changes and serving as an essential vessel for preserving heritage and collective memory.
And in our world, which just seems to be becoming more and more interconnected and interdependent,
the material strongly suggests that embracing linguistic diversity isn't just a nice ideal. It's fundamentally essential. Essential for fostering genuine cultural appreciation, for building mutual respect among people from different backgrounds, and for simply navigating the complexities of global interactions more effectively and ethically. By understanding, supporting, and even celebrating the intricate interplay of language and culture, the implication is that we can contribute to building a more inclusive global society, one that truly values and draws strength from its incredibly rich tapestry of voices and ways of seeing the world.
that makes you think, doesn't it? Here's a final thought maybe. If language truly shapes how we perceive the world, how might learning a new language, really engaging with it, fundamentally change your personal reality and open up entirely new ways of seeing? Something to consider, perhaps. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe to this YouTube channel.
Welcome back to the deep dive. You know, we often take it for granted, but what truly underpins, well, everything about culture? Shared stories, how we see the world. Today, we're diving into something really fundamental. Language itself. We've got a fantastic stack of sources for this deep dive, and we've pulled out the most important nuggets for you, our mission, to explore how language is far more than just words. It's really the living, breathing heartbeat of culture.
It's fascinating, isn't it? The research consistently highlights language as this dynamic, living repository of collective knowledge. It's not just a tool we use for communication. It actively shapes how we perceive the world, how we pass down heritage, and, how societies adapt over time.
Like a living archive.
Exactly, holding centuries of history, philosophy, practical wisdom embedded right into its structure.
Absolutely. Every word, every grammatical choice, it really does hold a story, a philosophy. And for you, our curious learner, we're going to uncover some truly surprising facts and maybe some aha moments about just how deeply intertwined language and culture are. It shows how language isn't just reflecting culture back at us, but it's an active catalyst. It builds culture. It transforms it. You might think translation is just swapping words.
Right, a simple one-to-one.
Yeah. But what really stood out in our research was how languages don't just describe culture. They kind of are culture.
It's true. That idea that you can just take a concept from one language and perfectly plop it into another, it often falls really short.
Okay, so here's where it gets really interesting. Our deep dive reveals that indigenous languages, for example, carry distinct epistemologies. And what we mean by that is like unique ways of knowing the world, complete frameworks for understanding reality.
Frameworks that English just can't replicate.
Exactly. Take Navajo or Diné-Bizaad. Its grammar isn't just a set of rules for talking. It directly embeds kinship relationships, reciprocal obligations, harmony with nature. It's baked right in.
The very structure encourages speakers to see the world in this relationship-centric way. It's incredible.
It really is.
And another powerful illustration is the Māori word wānau from New Zealand. It's often translated simply as family, but honestly, that barely scratches the surface.
So family isn't quite right.
Not really. Wānau denotes this whole extended communal network. It covers multiple generations, emphasizes collective identity, mutual support, a shared future. It completely transcends the typical English concept of a nuclear family.
Wow.
And it highlights the profound difficulty, the actual loss involved in trying to literally translate concepts like that. You just lose that cultural depth.
Wow. Okay. So family really doesn't even begin to cover it. It makes you realize how much richness we might miss if we only see the world through one language. But this incredible diversity, as beautiful as it is, it also faces a significant threat, according to the sources we looked at. I'm hearing some pretty concerning statistics.
You're absolutely right to raise that. The data is stark, unfortunately. UNESCO's Atlas of the World's Languages in Danger estimates there are around 7,000 languages globally, but over 3,000, that's roughly 40%, are predicted to vanish by 2100.
40%, that's staggering.
It is. It's a huge potential loss.
And that's not just words disappearing, is it? I mean, this raises a really important question. What's truly lost when a language dies? What's the deeper implication for all of us?
Oh, it's far more than just a dictionary shrinking. When a language dies, entire knowledge systems die with it. We lose unique understandings about ecology, traditional medicine, specific ways of storytelling, spirituality, histories, all specific to those cultures.
So ways of understanding the world, just gone.
Yes. The unique way a particular group has understood and interacted with their world for centuries, sometimes in complete harmony with their environment. Gone forever. It's a loss for all humanity, really. It diminishes our collective wisdom, our understanding of what it even means to be human.
That's a really sobering thought. But, okay, despite those alarming statistics, our sources do detail powerful revitalization efforts happening around the globe. So it's not just a story of loss. There's hope, resilience.
Definitely.
We're talking about initiatives like the Kanehunamoku Hawaiian Language Immersion Program, community efforts in Wales for Welsh. But maybe for the listener, language revitalization might sound a bit, I don't know, academic. What's the deeper meaning for the communities? How does it impact them beyond just learning words?
That's a crucial distinction, yeah. These aren't just academic exercises, they are profound cultural movements. The sources frame these efforts as acts of cultural resistance and self-determination. They're directly reclaiming languages that were often suppressed by colonial assimilation policies.
Pushed down deliberately.
Exactly. Think about Aboriginal Australian communities actively reviving Walpiri through community radio and school programs, or the Irish Gaelic revival, which has seen huge support through government policies, media like TG4. The impact isn't just linguistic. It's about reclaiming identity, sovereignty, a sense of belonging that was deliberately eroded. It's about healing historical trauma, really.
That's a powerful way to put it.
Yeah.
And it seems technology is stepping up too, isn't it? Like digital archives, language learning apps, making endangered languages accessible to younger generations. It's a fascinating blend, you know?
Ancient wisdom.
Modern tools.
Absolutely. Technology is, well, it can be a double-edged sword, but here it's proving invaluable. It allows for rapid dissemination, archiving, reaching people who might otherwise never have access.
Yeah.
And this also plays out individually. Multilingual people often code switch, like a Mexican-American speaking Spanish at home, English at work. They're not just communicating, they're expressing different facets of their hybrid identities.
They're showing different parts of themselves.
Yeah, precisely. And diaspora communities, like, say, Punjabi Canadians, actively maintain heritage languages. Through classes, festivals, ethnic media, they're reinforcing dual identities and cultural sovereignty for themselves and, importantly, for future generations.
Okay, so if language carries identity, drives resistance, how do our sources explain its role in, like, the bigger picture of society? Is it always unifying, or does it sometimes create distance, division even?
It's an excellent question, and the answer from the research is really both. Language is absolutely fundamental to social cohesion. It establishes common ways to communicate, shared social norms, builds trust within a community. When everyone understands each other, literally and figuratively, society tends to function more smoothly.
And are there specific ways languages do this, beyond just, basic communication?
Oh, definitely. If we connect this to the bigger picture, think about Japanese keigo, their intricate honorific language. It's not just about polite words. It actually embeds respect and social hierarchy directly into verb forms, vocabulary.
Wow, right into the grammar.
Exactly, reflecting deep cultural values of humility, deference. It fosters cohesion through that structured interaction. Or think about Yoruba proverbs, like, one hand cannot lift someone up. It's not just a saying. It encapsulates communal values, guiding behavior, reinforcing collective responsibility.
Gotcha.
Even a practice like Spanish sobremesa, lingering after meals just to socialize, to talk. It shows how language is deeply embedded in ritual, building bonds beyond just the meal itself.
It's incredible how language can enforce and reinforce those social structures. But like you hinted, it's not always harmonious. Language can also create divisions, can't it? I'm thinking about accents or dialects immediately signaling social class, region, ethnicity, leading to bias or exclusion sometimes. Like the classic Cockney versus received pronunciation distinction of the UK that often reinforces really deep-seated class distinctions.
Precisely. And in a country like India, with, over 1,600 languages and dialects? Language politics have historically led to significant tensions. The resistance in Tamil Nadu against Hindi imposition is a prime example. Language became a powerful symbol of regional identity, a real flashpoint for conflict.
Right.
And even colonial legacies persist. English might still dominate official domains in places like Nigeria, sidelining indigenous languages like Igbo, Hausa, Yoruba, and that perpetuates inequalities. It's a clear demo of how language can be a tool of power, both for unity and for maintaining divisions.
So it can definitely pull people apart as much as bring them together. But is there a positive counterexample from the sources?
Yeah.
Where a common language actually unifies rather than divides?
Absolutely. A powerful counterexample is Swahili in East Africa. It acts as a unifying lingua franca, a common language bridging diverse ethnic groups across a huge area. It fosters a broader regional identity, allowing for commerce, diplomacy, cultural exchange among people who might otherwise speak dozens of different mother tongues.
That's a powerful testament to its adaptability. Okay, so it's clear language has immense power. Our deep dive shows it's also a crucial tool in mobilizing social movements. I immediately think of Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech. It wasn't just the words, but that powerful, culturally resonant rhetoric that just moved millions, shifted a nation.
A perfect example.
Or the multilingual slogans and songs in South African anti-apartheid protests, building solidarity across different language groups.
And this continues today, of course. Movements like #BlackLivesMatter expertly use social media hashtags in multiple languages. They transcend borders, create global solidarity, broaden their reach, showing how language facilitates that shared consciousness.
Yeah, makes sense.
And beyond activism, language is also the primary vehicle for cultural transmission across generations, especially in oral traditions. Think of West African griots. They aren't just telling stories, they're living libraries, preserving history, genealogies, moral lessons through storytelling in Mandinka, adapting narratives, but keeping core truths.
Oh, living libraries.
And Aboriginal Australian Dreamtime stories, told in languages like Arrente, preserve creation myths, spiritual knowledge, maintaining deep connections to land and ancestors.
And language truly underpins artistic expression too, doesn't it? Take Japanese haiku. It's not just a poem. That strict structure reflects Zen Buddhist aesthetics, language constraining and elevating meaning.
Beautifully put. Or consider literature like Chinua Achebe's Things Fall Apart. He masterfully weaves Igbo proverbs into the English text, using language itself to highlight cultural tensions, the impact of colonialism, but also the enduring wisdom within the indigenous culture.
Right, showcasing what's being challenged.
Exactly. It extends to music, too. Bob Dylan's folk songs, they weren't just singing. They were speaking to the 1960s American counterculture, capturing its spirit through his lyrics. Or Fela Kuti's Afrobeat, mixing Yoruba and English to protest oppression in Nigeria, giving voice to a movement.
Yeah, powerful stuff.
And in religion, language holds sacred significance. Arabic uniting Muslims globally in prayer, Sanskrit connecting Hindus to ancient heritage. And the modern revival of Hebrew in Israel is fascinating, transforming a liturgical language into a living, breathing national tongue, reinforcing both cultural and religious identity in a really unique way.
So, okay, given all this power, this cultural depth, what does it all mean for politics and our, increasingly digital world? How does language intersect with political power? And what about technology opportunities, challenges?
Well, language is undeniably deeply entwined with political power. Nelson Mandela's speeches are a great illustration. By combining his native Xhosa with English, he consciously unified diverse groups in South Africa, showing how strategic linguistic choices can build bridges.
Right. Very deliberate.
And government language policies, like Canada's official bilingualism, they aren't just administrative decisions. They reveal national identity priorities, deliberate efforts to promote pluralism, cultural respect.
That makes sense. But this raises a big question. How do nations manage this complexity? Multiple languages within borders. Are there successful models? Or is it always a challenge?
It's a constant balancing act, definitely. Switzerland is often cited as an example of managing multilingualism effectively with its 4 official languages, balancing unity and diversity through policy and, crucially, cultural embrace. But linguistic imperialism remains a huge challenge. Languages like English, French, Spanish, they continue to dominate global media, academia, international bodies.
Right.
And that often marginalizes indigenous and minority languages, impacting their relevance, their survival prospects.
That's a really critical point about those power dynamics. And our research also shows technology offers both well, huge opportunities and distinct challenges here. Digital archives like the Rosetta Project are documenting thousands of languages for the future, which is amazing.
Incredible resource, yeah.
And learning apps are making heritage languages more accessible globally. But the dominance of English online, especially in tech and science, it risks marginalizing smaller languages even further, doesn't it? Contributing to a kind of digital cultural homogenization.
It absolutely does. Moreover, while machine translation tools are getting better and are incredibly helpful for basic stuff, they fundamentally struggle with cultural nuance. Idioms, humor, especially tonal languages.
Yeah, the subtleties get lost.
Completely. This risks serious misinterpretations, a significant loss of meaning in critical contexts. Skilled human translators remain absolutely crucial. They preserve cultural context, true intent, ensuring global conversations, whether it's diplomacy or social movements like #MeToo across languages, are truly inclusive and accurately convey their full message. That human element, that deep cultural understanding embedded in language, algorithms just can't replicate that yet. So if we connect all this to the bigger picture, linguistic diversity is truly a vital human strength. It profoundly enriches our collective knowledge, sparks creativity, offers this incredible array of perspectives on the world. Despite the challenges it can pose for communication or even national unity sometimes, language itself is a living, adaptable thing, constantly evolving through contact and exchange.
It truly is. Just think about how many loanwords we use every day in English. Sushi from Japanese, yoga from Sanskrit, fiesta from Spanish. They don't just add words, they show that cultural borrowing, the fluidity of it all. Or hybrid languages like Spanglish or Hinglish, blending grammar, cultural references. You see it so much in diaspora communities. It's just a testament to language's dynamic nature, its endless ability to adapt, grow, reflect complex identities.
And for you, our learner, what does all this mean? Our sources really emphasize that embracing linguistic diversity isn't just like a nice idea. It's absolutely essential for fostering cultural appreciation, mutual respect, ethical global interaction in our interconnected world. Education is key here. Think about Finland's multilingual programs starting early. They foster not just linguistic fluency, but deep cultural fluency too.
So, yeah, lots to think about there. Here's a thought for you to maybe mull over. How might learning a new language fundamentally transform your personal perception? Open your eyes to new worldviews. What fascinating insights might you unlock by stepping outside your linguistic comfort zone? Thanks for diving deep with us today.